Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle, and this is The Firewall. Well, certainly it's not going to come as breaking news to anyone that there's a lot of political discord and division in America today. Conservatives and progressives are so far apart and simply talk past each other so much that it's like we're living in different countries. And you know what? We're supposed to be living in different countries. Before the unconstitutional, rampant centralization of federal power over our lives, we were and were supposed to be separate countries, each with its own unique culture and preferences and cuisine and language and all the rest. Now, we know what the progressive, gun-controlled, safety-helmeted, calorie-restricted, carbon-neutral, politically correct, weenie dictatorship looks like. They're trying to foist it on us every day. But if you could take a little chunk of America, say 5 million steely-eyed missile men and another 5 million sleek and capable naughty librarians, and make your own little state with your own internal rules, what would it look like? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Republic of Bill. Well, politically, the fundamental structure of the Republic of Bill looks pretty familiar. It's the U.S. Constitution verbatim. There are a couple of minor changes. A line item veto is one. Another is the 28th Amendment, which reads, "No one elected to public office shall, once their term expires, be eligible to hold that same office." That's right, you savages out there beyond our borders. There are no incumbents in the Republic of Bill, no campaign distractions, no lobbyist leverage, no vote buying, no nothing. We have this radical idea that we can find 535 new people every 2 years out of a population of 10 million. There's no one in the Congress of the Republic of Bill who was elected before the invention of electricity. Citizens are encouraged to be heavily armed here in the Republic of Bill. That's why our crime rate is so low. The general attitude here can best be summed up as, hey, if that guy didn't want to get shot, then maybe he shouldn't have come through my bedroom window. We don't tolerate crime here. That said, common sense is king here in the Republic of Bill. If some guy fires a shotgun through the door at a Jehovah's Witness who comes knocking, that guy's going to go to jail for murder. You think it might be hard to tell the difference between that and a home invasion? It's actually very simple. You can marry a person of the same sex in the Republic of Bill. You can marry your office chair if you'd like. We really don't care. Now, some people say this desanctifies marriage. We think sanctity is internal and can't be imposed by force of government. That said, there are some things that you can't do in the Republic of Bill, and one of them is impose your will on others. If a church opposes gay marriage, that's their business. And in the Republic of Bill, you can't make them do it, and you certainly can't make them accept it. Now, in a similar vein, we believe very strongly in private property here in the Republic of Bill. That means if you own a restaurant and you want to hire only 6-foot-tall albinos, that is literally your business. It also means that if you don't want to serve peg-legged Arabs or lesbians or conservatives or gays or just me, that's also your business. What we find, though, is that bigots are dirtbags. No one forces them to close their businesses. Most people just don't give them their business, and they end up having to close on their own. It works out really well, actually. Now, of course, that's for private property only. Public services are utterly colorblind, and racism of any kind is simply not tolerated. Our economy is humming here in the Republic of Bill. We have a few reasonable regulations for safety, and that's about it. And we have a lot of energy in the Republic of Bill. Oil, natural gas, and just boatloads of clean, safe, powerful thorium reactors. We're actually thinking about air conditioning the entire outdoors. Education and healthcare are very, very affordable in the Republic of Bill, and there's a simple reason for that. It's because we treat education and healthcare as commodities, because that's what they are. Our schools compete for your children, and that means they are incentivized to have high test scores and low tuitions. And a 2-cent aspirin in the Republic of Bill costs 2 cents, not $20. That's because people pay cash for the small items, and doctors and hospitals show their actual rates and their customer ratings. They buy stop-loss insurance for the big-ticket items. How can people afford to buy their own health care and education here in the Republic of Bill? Well, they can shop around and get the best value with all the extra money they have, because income taxes in the Republic of Bill are 10%. You do your taxes in 3 minutes, 10%, and everybody pays. We don't keep taxing to pay for the government. We get as much government as 10% buys. Now, of course, if you want to pay for public radio, the Republic of Bill Endowment for the Arts, the Republic of Bill Superconducting Supercollider, a government-run retirement plan, any of that, well, you certainly can. You get a pull-down menu when you do your taxes online, and you can earmark whatever additional funds you want to pay. And that's where the money goes. But the 10% buys what the government is supposed to do. defend the Republic, and build some roads. You want a bigger government than that? Knock yourself out. As it turns out, about half of the 10 million residents of the Republic of Bill want a space program, so they pay $10 a month extra in taxes. That's $600 million a year. Combined with 5 million people in neighboring Bhutan, you can see the leaders of the two countries here resplendent in our national uniforms. That's $1.2 billion a year, voluntarily. With a space program run by engineers and test pilots, rather than politicians and bureaucrats, $10 bolts cost $10 and not $500. We expect to have a permanent presence on the moon in 6 years. Well, we hope you enjoyed your brief tour of the Republic of Bill. You're welcome to stay. We love hard-working people. The registration forms for legal immigration are on the counter. They're printed in English because that's the official language of the Republic of Bill. We're happy to help translate them into Spanish or French, Mandarin, Russian, Korean, or anything else, but we do business in English. The rules here are pretty simple. Don't be a jerk and mind your own business. It's printed right there on the money. Don't be a jerk and mind your own business, along with a cutout of a profile. It's not a picture of me or any other politician. The profile on our money could be anybody. That's the profile of the common person. That's your profile. Welcome home.
Well, good evening. My name is Elliot Fine, and it's great to see you all out here. I must apologize first off for not having a teleprompter, so you won't see me looking left and looking right and continuing to talk. I will have to read from this piece of paper. Just to let you know, in case you've forgotten, please silence your cell phones. Mr. Whittle has let me know that it is okay to take pictures, to videotape to your heart's content, but don't be annoying to your neighbors. We'd like to thank you all for coming here and joining us in this very special Northwest Business Club event here in Bellingham. We'd really like you all to become members, if you're not, of our Northwest Business Club. We have brought such noted luminaries here to town, such as Ann Coulter, Joan Goldberg, David Horowitz, John Locke, Tom DeWeese, and local luminaries like the State's Attorney General Rob McKenna, State Supreme Court Judge Richard Sanders, State's Auditor Brian Sontag, Rabbi Lappin has also been up here as well, and many others, including our local sheriff, our police chief, and many of the other local politicians. We also hold debates every time during an election cycle. So please join us, the Northwest Business Club. You can find us online. By the way, I am Elliot Fine, and I'm pleased to serve not only on the Business Club's board, but on its program committee as well. Being on this program committee, I also know that this event would not have happened without the tireless efforts and late-night adventures of Ellen Baker, who spearheaded this evening's event. Thank you to Ellen. Some don't know this, but we were founded 22 years ago by the local business community to network, but even more to share ideas and knowledge by bringing in speakers monthly on an incredibly wide range of topics. Founding members and board members, would you all please stand? Later, would you please remain standing? Because we'd like to give a special hat tip to a founding board member, Nada Deitch, a grand lady whose vacant career prepared her perfectly to serve as our treasurer all these many years. In addition, with style, grace, boldness, and arm-twisting when needed, she has been our membership ambassadress-in-chief. Thank you very much for all of you. And we also want to take a moment to thank those of you here tonight, individuals and groups that helped make tonight happen, and to thank businesses like Samuel's Furniture that helped set the stage this evening. Now let's get to kicking off tonight's event. I'm pleased to introduce a gentleman who is extremely well known, not only on the West Coast, but across the nation, for expressing common sense principles with clarity and panache. Here's a man who pulls no punches, whether speaking out for the free market or for the bedrock of liberty that keeps America unique. Without further ado, let's welcome, direct from LA, Bill Whittle.
So nice to see people standing up at the beginning of the show instead of standing up on the way out during it for a time. It's such a pleasure to be here. I think since this is a unique night, I've done a lot of public speaking, never done anything like this before. So I think probably the evening will go best if we start with the understanding that nobody has any idea what we're doing tonight at all. None idea at all. The technical people are superb and are guessing what we're talking about, but the rest of us, we're just taking shots in the dark, and we need to have some fun up here tonight. So, that's what we're going to do. I have to tell you, sometimes there's a joke that's so good you just have to keep using it because it really goes to the heart of the matter. And virtually every time I go anywhere in the United States, I start by saying, it's a pleasure being here tonight. I just got off a plane from Los Angeles. It's always a joy to come and visit the United States. I was actually raised in America. And that goes over very well in Texas, and it goes over very well in Minneapolis and places like that. But I have to tell you in all honesty, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, I actually believe, after what I was told in the 2-hour ride up from SeaTac, that I have finally found a place crazier than Santa Monica. I actually believe it's true. And that's an achievement. So that's something we might end up talking about tonight. I keep a little iPhone here with a timer on it. I got a little picture of Fidel Castro here to get me out of 4-hour territory. But that'll keep us honest. And I think the trip up was really interesting because I really do like to get a feel for where we are and geographically in the country. And I think that the trip up, I learned so much from Glenn and from Ellen that I think really we want to talk about stuff that's really pertinent up here. Pertinent to people who live up here, because I think on some levels, what's happening up here in Washington is the beginning of a bell curve that's going to affect the whole country. And again, no offense, because I live in Mordor. You can see the giant red eye over the Hollywood sign from my house. But some of this stuff is not good, and we need to understand it. So one final thing before we start tonight, I think this certainly applies for me, I'm sure it applies for Ed and Glenn later on. We're going to have fun with people tonight on the other side of the aisle and some of what they believe. But they're our neighbors and our friends, they're Americans, they have a different idea of what they think works for the country. It's important we don't ever lose track of that. I don't ever want to get to the point where, we really are tribes at war with each other. It's a difference of opinion. I have an opinion based on certain facts. We'll talk about some of those tonight. Maybe some people's minds will be changed. But I really do want to say that no matter what we talk about, when we talk about these weenies, it's meant in a friendly way. And that they genuinely do believe, for the very, very large part of them, believe that they're doing the right thing for the right reasons. So I just wanted that said before we get started dismantling their entire worldview. There's so many things about this particular trip that are so unusual, but most unusual of all is what Ellen did. Ellen went back way past the video archives. And for reasons unknown to me, she picked me up at the airport and she said, I printed out a copy of your essay called Magic, which I wrote in 2003, I think 11 years ago, which is incredible. 2003 seems like the future. But she wrote an essay I wrote called Magic back when I was doing a blog called Jack. Thank you. Those were fun days. But it really was the perfect thing to find, because what I want to talk to you about tonight pretty much exclusively is this idea of magical thinking. Sometimes you hear people refer to it as wishful thinking, but magical thinking is a better way to think of it. Magical thinking is the idea that if you believe in something hard enough, it will come to pass. And I think when you get into the difference between us and progressives, that's really the fundamental difference between the two camps. Some people accept that no matter how much you want something to be true, it just ain't true. Period. Other people simply will not accept that. They believe that the wish and the will to it will bring it about. So tonight we're going to take a look at who's right on this critical issue of magical thinking. Now, in that essay, Magic, I started with a couple of examples of magical thinking. And I want to kind of build up, starting with one example I used a lot. The first example I used in that essay was the Loch Ness Monster. A lot of people believe in the Loch Ness Monster. Lots of people go to tours specifically for Scotland so they can sit there on the banks of Loch Ness and wait to get the one picture that is going to prove to everybody that this is it. And as a person who's worked in an observatory for a lot of my life, and who's had people say, I saw UFOs in the Everglades last week, there is a tingle, this is absolute thrill that comes with this sensation that just any second now, if I just wait for the right moment, that veil of reality is going to part. And this wondrous, magical world, just barely out of the corner of your eye, is going to appear in front of us. And when you're at Loch Ness, or when you're at a place where you think UFOs might be coming down tonight, you can actually feel it. And I have to tell you, folks, it's a great feeling. I started at the Miami Planetarium when I was 14, and my first year there, we ran the observatory at nighttime, and I was up on the roof, and somebody literally screamed, a woman screamed like in a movie scream, and we all turned around and said, what is it? She said, UFOs! This was in downtown Miami. And she pointed up into the sky, and no fooling now, there was a V-shaped formation of glowing orange ovals that were flying over the city, and she pointed, and I saw them, and other people saw them, and everybody saw them in the same place, and I had that electric, magical feeling that I think our people on the other side of the aisle experience much of the time. It was tremendous. It was tremendous. There is nothing like that feeling, honestly. That feeling that genuine magic is happening in front of your eyes, that the world as you understand it is not the world. There's a greater world beyond, and I could see them up there in the sky, and other people saw them too. And I was blown away for about 15 seconds. And then somebody standing next to me, kind of quietly, probably an engineer or another rotten squirrel, turned to me quietly and said, they're birds. I said, they're not birds, they're glowing ovals. He said, no, if you look carefully, you can see they're geese. This is the white belly of a geese. If you look carefully, you can see their wings and their neck. Now, Miami, with all the bright streetlights, is lit from below, so the dark wings and the dark necks of the geese are virtually impossible to see against the sky, but that white bottom of the geese reflects that light back from the streetlights that are going up. And sure enough, if you look carefully, there were wings and necks. And I was heartbroken. But as an official of the Museum of Science, I felt it my duty to say to everybody, they're birds. And I showed them why, and the rage that was directed towards me, the rage, and the anger and the denial. A nice guy like me, 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid, was palpable. And the reason it was so upsetting to so many people was I'd taken away their magic. I'd taken away their wonder, that magic. What a rotten thing to do. What a miserable, rotten, low-life thing to do. What possible motive could you have to take away somebody's magic other than the fact that it's true? That's the only thing I can think of. Excuse me one second. And by the way, I don't suppose he's watching right now, but Marco Rubio, on behalf of public speakers everywhere, thank you very much for your sacrifice on our day. Thirsty work up here. So after that experience with stealing people's magic, I began to sort of think about this idea of magical thinking, about wanting to believe things so much. And it's remarkable what that desire for magic will do to your critical facilities. Absolutely remarkable. Let's go back to Loch Ness, for example. The people who believe that there's a Loch Ness monster will tell you that it's a plesiosaur. It is a reptile, a giant reptile, and they'll point to the flippers and the long neck and everything, and they'll say this is an air-breathing reptile that has somehow managed to survive for 30 or 40, 50 million years in a little cave underneath Loch Ness, and that's what it is. It's a plesiosaur. Now, putting aside that that's a pretty long vacation to take from the rest of the gene pool, think about this for a second. What they are saying is that the Loch Ness monster is an air-breathing animal the size of a bus. Now, as it turns out, in the ocean there are in fact air-breathing animals the size of a bus, and they're called whales. And when we talk about whales, we don't have a grainy picture taken in 1963 of a wake from 2.5 miles offshore where the whale may be, and there's not anecdotal evidence of the existence of a whale because whales are real. And if you want to see a whale, you can get a boat and go look at one, because whales exist. We have thousands of pictures of whales taken every single day. There's no question whales exist. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if this is an air-breathing reptile with a neck that's the length of the stage virtually, why aren't there 50,000 photographs taken of this thing every single hour? Why? I'm waiting. Why is it that the best evidence for this creature, as I say, it's a black smudge out of the boundaries of a grainy picture, or absolute evidence that this old man who's saying he absolutely saw it, he has no financial interest in this at all. Why aren't we seeing pictures of this thing as it comes up to breathe 5 or 10 times an hour? Because it doesn't exist, that's why. Because it doesn't exist. Parenthetically, there's no fish in that lake. I guess it orders out for pizza. They do find that there's a lot of rotted logs on the bottom of the lake, and over time some of these logs will float to the surface and create kind of a hump-like thing. So there's no explanation for the Loch Ness Monster. But it doesn't exist, because if it's an air breather, we'd see it every day. But how many people believe in this creature? Really believe in it? How many people believe in it enough to spend thousands of dollars to visit that lake? What part of their brain got shut down in order to believe in this, and why? That's really fascinating, don't you think? That the idea that they could never make this connection, it's an air breather the size of a bus. People will, when they want to believe something enough, they will grasp at any straw, or grasp a fuzzy, out-of-focus picture. So let's move up a level of likelihood, because the Loch Ness Monster simply doesn't exist. It can't exist because it has to be there. It's disqualified. It's not there, period. Let's move up one level of unlikelihood, something that is conceivably possible, and that's UFOs. I spent a lot of time teaching astronomy. I have a rough idea how hard it is to get from one planet to another, and I have another idea of the 3 or 4 magnitudes of difficulty greater to get from one star to another. But let's assume that these creatures are zipping around in little vehicles the size of a bus again. How likely is that? Well, when you talk to people about evidence, again, photographs, and they're all shown to be fakes. I talked to a guy who was like the UFO guy in Los Angeles. He was Mr. UFO on all the websites. He challenged me to a debate. And I went to his house and I looked at his video. And he said, "Why do you think that is?" I said, "That's a little weird. You turn your head upside down and oh yeah, that's, you can see that's a bottle cap lying on the bottom of the ocean. These aren't things moving around a spaceship. That's just junk floating in the water." Okay, but what about this video? And he tried to show me a picture. This is like the space shuttle from the distance with a tethered satellite it had. I said, the width of this thing is visible. If this thing is 6 miles long, the tether is 3/4 of a mile wide. What about this video? And they keep moving the goalposts. So when you go to UFOs, what you find is, here's the evidence. You see here's a pieces of tin foil. It looks like somebody smashed 3 Jiffy Pop containers together. And that's really what it looks like. It's a collection of debris that would fit on the top of this lectern of broken aluminum foil. And this is the evidence for a presumably faster-than-light vessel that can travel clear of radar, has smashed into the Earth at some incredible speed, and we have a couple pieces of tin foil? If the Air Force says it's a balloon that reflects radar signals made of tin foil, doesn't that seem more likely to you? In other words, if you were right and this was a crash flying saucer, where's the warp drive? Where's the warp core? Where are the controls? Where's all the stuff? Doesn't exist. Well, it exists in Area 51. Convenient. Conveniently free of evidence. Conveniently free of proof. So the chances of UFOs, flying saucers, or aliens from another planet is not 0, but it's so close to 0 that that's a pretty good working hypothesis. But magical thinking just continues to affect all of us. And when you start to get into the real dangers of magical thinking, you get into the dangers when people apply magical thinking to government and society. Because then you start to get into real trouble. So what does magical thinking look like in the world that we live in today? Well, we'll come back to what the government believes in a minute. But one of the most magical thoughts about society today is the idea that the government can generate wealth, that the government can generate stuff, that the government makes stuff. That's a magical belief. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. There's as little evidence for that as there is for the Loch Ness Monster. The idea that the government can propel the economy, that the government is the way to go, is magical thinking. And we'll get into the reasons why people want to believe that, but let's just look at some of the evidence. Government is incompetent because it's impersonal. And let's go to a couple of local examples. It's been brought to my attention that as we speak, underneath Seattle is a giant drilling machine. It's called Big Bertha. There it is. That doesn't seem like something you could easily misplace. And my understanding is that this giant thing, which is used successfully to mine and to build the channel tunnels and so on. This thing was launched into the bowels of Seattle, and how far did it get? It was a remarkable achievement of human engineering. I don't know if we have that slide showing how far it got. I think it went about 100 yards. But here's my point. There we go. Look at that. That's got to be 60 yards. And then it got stuck. Now, why is it still down there? It's been down there for a while, right? It's costing millions and millions of your dollars every day, right? This is factually true. Why is it still down there? Well, it's still down there because it doesn't belong to anybody. That's why it's still down there. If it belonged to you, sir, if it were your giant drilling machine and you were paying $1 million a day, you get that damn thing out of there in a big hurry. Because you don't want to be paying those millions of dollars, but it's the government, so the millions of dollars don't belong to anybody, and nobody's responsible for it. And the person who steps up to get that thing out of there gets a spotlight on him, and people start asking how to get stuck in the first place. There's no incentive for this guy to get it out of here. This is all you need to know about government creating things that work. It doesn't. Nobody owns it, nobody pays for it, and nobody's responsible for it. That's why you are paid millions of dollars. And to be honest with you guys, I'd like to be less depressing than this. You're probably going to be paying for that to your grandchildren graduate magical thinking school, because they're not going to be in universities if we keep this up. It's appalling. Let's take another example locally about what government is in terms of its competence, in terms of its ability just to do the simple things that you have to do to run a business. In other words, if you've ever run a business, let's say you run a McDonald's franchise, you know in order to staff the fry station, you have to have reliable people show up, and you have to have a backup for when they call in sick, because they're not really sick, they're out back at 7-Eleven smoking doobies. But you have to have somebody capable of taking care of that fry station, and usually as the manager, it's going to be you. But let's take a look at something else the government's done up here. There's some bridges. Now, bridges are designed by engineers, and that is every engineer's living nightmare right there. Now, sometimes engineers make mistakes. Mistakes happen in the real world, we have to understand that. But there's one of these bridges that I was pointed out to. I don't know if it's that one or the next one. I heard this story on the way up. There it is. I heard this story on the way up, and I couldn't believe it until instantly I could believe it. And what I was told by Glenn, who we'll get to meet in a little bit, was that this bridge collapsed. And do you know why this bridge collapsed? It's so interesting to me. This bridge collapsed because of repetitive mechanical stress. This bridge collapsed because for 30 years, trucks would run into that bridge. For 30 years, the top of trucks would hit the bottom of that top span of that bridge. And for 30 years, it was like somebody hitting that bridge with a hammer. Do you know why the trucks kept hitting the bridge? Because the sign saying what the clearance to the bridge was wrong. It was wrong for 30 years until the bridge fell into the water. Here's the design for the bridge that you guys spent 20 or 30 or 50 or $100 million on. It was canceled at the last minute because nobody did the calculations to figure out what their boats would fit underneath it after $100 million or something was spent. That's government. That's government. That's not incompetent people. It's lack of ownership and responsibility. I want to go back to just thinking about that other bridge for a second. If it were your bridge, and you found out that there was a sign that said clearance 12 feet, but the clearance was only 11 feet, and a truck hit that bridge, what would you do the next day? Change the sign. Yeah. I would change the sign before I let 30 years of trucks hit that bridge until the bridge collapsed in the river. I would change the sign if it were my bridge. But it's not my bridge. The bridge doesn't belong to anybody. It's a miracle nobody was on that bridge. Somebody actually was apparently and survived. The guy had the good sense to get out of his car and float to the shore, which is more sense than the government had in terms of updating the sign. I think you can see the car right there. Hey man, I'm in the water. Maybe I ought to get out of this sinking vehicle and swim to safety. And maybe we ought to get out of this sinking vehicle and swim to safety too, before it's too late. Because a government that will not change a bridge sign after 30 years, rather than have that bridge collapse into the river, is not the kind of government we need, deserve, or should have anywhere in this country at all. Period. Incompetence plus a desire to control plus the coercive power of violence equals government. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but the bigger the government gets, the more this kind of thing works its way into the system. So, when people tell you there's a government plan to create jobs, or there's a government plan to redistribute wealth, or there's a government plan to stimulate the economy, $850 billion, gone into things originally supposed to go into things like fixing bridges. But after they allocated that money to bridge fixing, I can't make up stories like this because I'm not this venal and I'm not this depressed most of the time. But what they found was of that money that was allocated for infrastructure, a lot of people in the progressive base got very upset because if we're going to fix bridges and roads, that means that the money's going to go to men. Because men go out and fix bridges and roads, generally speaking. And we found that a fair amount of that money actually was diverted to things like social studies programs and cultural centers and all that other stuff. Because you don't want to launch this war on women. So there you go again. But let's come back to this idea. I'm going to take a little diversion here. Because this is really, I think, the most important thing to understand in terms of the difference between conservatives and progressives. If you think about the wedge that divides social issues, if you think about the wedge that makes a person either go to the left and become blue or go to the right and become red, ultimately, when it's all said and done, we'll come back to that in a minute. When it's all said and done, the wedge is really wealth creation. It's really just that simple. We can actually use that. We'll be coming back to that, I think, in the end. Here's what I want you to think about. If it turns out that wealth is limited, that there's only a certain amount of money in the world, then the progressives are right, and liberals are right. If there's only a limited pot of money in the world, then a guy who has a $20 million jet took more than his fair share from people who should go into college or from single mothers or whoever else could have used that money a little more equitably. He's taken more than his fair share. If there's a limited pot of money and somebody has more than somebody else, well, that's piracy, robbery. And they're right. Business people should be victimized, vilified, demonized, because they're greedy and they took more than their fair share, if wealth is limited. But if wealth can be created out of thin air, then businessmen are not villains, they're heroes. The reason he has a jet is because he's kept a tiny sliver of the total new wealth that he's generated for everybody. No business gets to keep all of its revenue for the CEO. It just doesn't happen that way. A guy's got a $20 million jet has created billions of dollars likely of wealth for everybody, of which he's kept a sliver, and he's decided to buy a jet. So the question is, really, can wealth be created out of thin air, yes or no? Well, if you go home after this and you Google Los Angeles, 1863, you'll see it consisted of a couple of adobe huts and a hitching post for a donkey. I flew over it all the way up here. It's improved considerably since then. So where did it come from? Where did that wealth come from? Did we send the Marines over to Djibouti and steal all the wealth from Djibouti? That's what some people think. Where did it come from? Where did the Mercedes-Benzes come from? And the skyscrapers, and the elevators, and the MRI machines, and the widescreen TVs, and the air conditioners, and the iPhones, and the iPads, and the sound systems? Where did the diamond rings and all these other, where did it come from if there's a limited pot of wealth? Where was there enough wealth in the world in 1863 to create modern Los Angeles today? It didn't exist. There wasn't that much wealth in the world. LA downtown is richer today than the entire planet was 150 years ago. And if you don't believe me, the richest American in the world 100 years ago might come to an event like this in a carriage drawn by 2 horses, 4 horses if he was really showing off. He might be in a carriage drawn by 8 horses. When I go to events in Los Angeles, I'm in a carriage drawn by 360 horses, and I'm nothing like the richest American. This wealth has been created out of thin air. And since wealth can be created out of thin air, the people that create actual wealth are in fact heroes. They're not villains, they're heroes. So we have to understand how wealth creation works if we're going to fight this magical thinking. And I'll come back to the magical thinking in a second, but I want to take a quick aside. If we can go back to the Gold.com logo, I think this guy's been in the water long enough, actually. So let's take a minute and figure out how wealth creation actually works, because you really need to understand this. There are several ways that you can create wealth. A simple way is to simply invent something, create something. If I have a piece of canvas and $12 worth of oils and brushes, and I create a masterpiece that somebody's willing to pay $100,000 for, I've generated actual wealth, something of value, out of thin air. It wasn't there before. I sat down, I put a couple strokes there, my talent has created something that wasn't there before. It could be a screenplay, and it doesn't have to be art. If you have a business plan for a dry cleaning store on a corner that was a vacant lot, and you go and execute that plan, and you put a dry cleaning store there, where there was nothing before, you have created wealth out of thin air, out of the vision of your mind. And almost every single businessman that you meet, this is the thing that progressives never understand about rich people. The progressives think that the people who start and succeed in businesses, not their degenerate sons or grandsons or triple sons or whatever, but the people with a vision, they tend to think that they got into business for business out of love. They got out of business out of something they really liked, something they really cared about, something they knew they could improve, and the money followed all of those benefits. So you can invent things out of thin air. That's one way to create wealth. Another way you can create wealth is very subtle, but you can increase wealth by adding complexity to something. The worst job I ever had was working as a temp at an insurance company, and they led me past the cubes, and then they led me past where they stored the rice, and then they led me farther into the back where the attack dogs were, and on the other side of that was a single desk against a concrete wall, and there was a folder about this thick with that old computer paper, the green and white stuff with the sprockets down the side, gigantic folder about this thick, with nothing but green and white printouts, and another one right next to it. And the woman said to me, okay, so here's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be taking this file, and you're going to go through them one by one, and these are the names of all the people who filed complaints, and this is their case number. And then you're going to go over to this file, and she pulled it down, and when you find that a complaint has been filled and rectified, you need a little tick mark next to it. And I said, I can't do this job. And she said, what part of it don't you understand? I said, I understand it fully. That's why I can't do this. I can't sit here for 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours and do this. I just don't have the mind for it. I can't do it. But I thought about it on the way to the unemployment agency. And I thought, why would they pay me $7 an hour and the temp agency $12 an hour for me to check that list against another? What possible advantage, what wealth was I generating to make it worth the money they were paying me? And I came to realize that if they're paying me $7 an hour to make sure that these people have their problems solved, that means you don't have to get a manager involved at $50 an hour to make sure that the problem gets solved. And it means that if you make sure that that problem is solved and that customer's been taken care of, he doesn't leave and take $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 of lifetime payments with him. Of course it's worth $7 for me to do this awful work, because a checklist is more valuable than an unchecked list. Pretty simple, really. It's worth more. It's worth more. I created some wealth in the 3 entries that I took off before they got somebody else to do it. I generated just a little bit of wealth doing that. Most people don't realize that. When you add complexity, you make the world a little bit richer. But the main way you create wealth is through trade, and what trade does to people. So we'll take a little walk back in time, because our economy is far too complex to really track this nowadays. Let's go back to caveman days, and we'll take a look at how economies really work. Let's say that up in the mountains are the dark-haired, single-browed people, and they're hunters, and they live up in the mountains. And since they're hunters, they hunt. They don't do much gathering, because there's not a lot to gather. Mostly they're meat eaters, so their spears are superb. Their spears have very, very good metal spear heads, and they're beautifully put together, and they break runes on the side, and they're firm, and they're rich, and they're straight as an arrow, and they hardly ever break. They're fantastic. But since they don't do a lot of gathering up there in the mountains, their baskets look like birds' nests. Now, down by the shore is a gatherer tribe. They don't do a whole lot of hunting. Occasionally they'll throw a spear at fish, but they gather virtually everything. So their spears are kind of wobbly sticks, but their baskets are woven tight enough to hold water. Now one day, coming home, the guy from the hunter tribe meets a person from the gatherer tribe halfway between the mountains and the seashore, and after they determine that they're not going to kill each other, the hunter guy, in his caveman grunting way, basically, but basically what he's saying is, I have to tell you, sir, that is simply the most exquisite basket I've seen ever in my entire life. And the gathering guy goes, whoa. And what he's basically saying is, well, allow me to retort. What a remarkably fine piece of workmanship in that spear. And so they decide, without any money or anything, that the hunter is going to give his beautifully made spear in exchange for that perfectly woven basket. They make the exchange, they both go home, and at that point the miracle occurs, because when they both go home, the question is, which one goes home richer? Both of them go home richer. This is the thing that the progressives can't understand about free trade. Both sides go home richer. Nobody looks at this. It's a miracle. If I go to the drive-thru line at McDonald's at 11 o'clock at night and I make a swap with the clown, we're both happier. I'd rather have the hamburger. They'd rather have the $2.50. We both win. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is the guy who just traded the spear for the basket goes back up to the hunting tribe. There's thousands of great spears in the hunting tribe because everybody hunts, but nobody's got a basket like this. Nobody. So he'll come in the middle of the day, just sort of, flippantly with his little basket over his shoulder, and everybody's going to gather around him, and everybody wants to see the basket. They say, ladies, we'll be doing a single You can show him the basket in the privacy of my cave, and you can make the reservations for it ahead. Because he's got something that nobody else in the village has. It's got value. And everybody wants one. Everybody wants one, because nobody's got one. So he says, wait a minute. As he's going to sleep that night, he says, wait a minute. Everybody wants this basket. They're going to trade me the shiny pebbles we use for money, but money isn't wealth. The little pebbles are just units of exchange. Nobody wants the pebbles. They want the basket. He says, I've been offered 60 shiny stones for this basket, which I'm not going to sell. And he says to himself, what if I got up earlier than I needed to tomorrow? Maybe I go through a spear a week. I probably could make a spear if I got up 2 hours early and stayed up 2 hours later. I could probably make an extra spear. Then I could take that extra spear, go back down, and trade it for another basket, then I have more of these shiny rocks. Now, if the guy is a progressive or a Democrat, he'll put the basket in the back of the cave and he'll eventually dissolve away into nothing. But if he's a conservative or a Republican, he'll say, hold on. My daughter isn't going to starve to death after all because my idiot son-in-law can make the spears, and I can just supervise, and I get 4 guys making spears. I can trade them for 4 baskets. We're going to do extra work, more work than we need to do, in exchange for the extra reward. So he takes it down to where he met the guy before. They trade these 4 brand new spears for 4 awesome baskets. The baskets come back to the village. Everybody wants one. Everybody's ready to trade for one. And here's the other thing that these people on the left don't seem to understand. Who loses here? Nobody loses here. Nobody. The people in the hunting tribe have baskets the likes of which they never had before. The people in the gathering tribe have spears that they never could have made. Everybody's richer. Nobody's poorer. It is true that the guy who's manufacturing the spears has more shiny rocks than the other guy, but everybody wins. Everybody goes up. That's wealth creation. And if you understand that, then you understand why they're wrong. Why it's magical thinking to assume that government can do these things, because all the government people do are the government people come in with the big spears and the big coats and they say, we'll take 10% of that basket and we're going to have some of this, we're going to have some of this. They don't make any baskets. They don't make any spears. They limit how many baskets and spears you can actually make. They're not creating wealth, they're stopping wealth. They're taking things by force because they can't make the baskets and the spears. They don't have the talent. They don't know how to open a jackknife, most of these people. So since they can't generate wealth on their own, they're going to use the club of them together, the big strong people with the sticks, and they're going to make sure that they're going to take care of some of your wealth. They're going to take it from you. That's how it works. That's how it works. It's always how it's worked. It's always how it worked that way back in the beginning. It works that way today. They want to take the extra work that people do for the extra reward and make it their own. And now let's talk about that kind of chicanery. Because when you get down to brass tacks, now we start to get into the really dangerous aspect of magical thinking. Because if you're going to take stuff from other people, if you're going to take stuff from the guys who are making this stuff, you've got to have a justification for this. Now, some of this is cynical. They know they're taking the person's wealth. Some of it's genuinely well-meaning. But one of the most magical beliefs in the world today, endemic to the left, I'm sorry to say, is the idea that you can build a new human being. That you can create a new kind of person. That you can upset the laws of biology, genetics, evolution, that say that you put a number of resources down on the ground and bacteria will multiply to the limit of the resources. You put enough cat food down, you get fat cats. You put enough squirrel food down, you get fat squirrels. These laws are built into us. They're part of our flesh. Greed, envy, work, motivation, all that stuff. It's built into who we are. But when the government or any kind of a philosophical movement says, no, we're going to change the flesh. We're going to make a new man out of these base materials, to make a better person. That desire to make a better person universally ends up in rivers of blood. It's really strange, but if you believe that people are greedy and corrupted and willing to steal power, you end up with Disneyland. If you believe that people are made out of gold and you can turn them into noble people, you end up with Auschwitz and the gulags. It's absolutely true. Because the people cannot be made into new people. That's magical thinking. And in order to have this paradise on earth, you have to take the bad eggs out and shoot them and kill them. And it means you end up with terror. When the French Revolution took place, all of the aristocrats were guillotined. It was called the Terror. But that wasn't terrifying enough. The revolutionaries were saying, we're failing. All the people that know how to do things are dead. Why is everything going wrong? Somebody must have counter-revolutionary thoughts. Him. Off he goes. terror becomes the great terror. We got to keep killing people until we get it right. We're going to make a new man, a new French revolutionary man. No, you're not. You're just going to kill a lot of people in your attempt. The National Socialists in Germany, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, decided we're going to make a new man. And he's going to be noble and pure and wonderful. No, he's not. He's going to murder 10 million people, 20, in cold blood, in freight cars. That's what the new man does. He murders people wholesale, industrially. The communists were sure that you could make a new Soviet man. And when the new Soviet man didn't come along, and when all the problems still existed, all the problems of greed and laziness and envy and stealing and all that other stuff that was still there, they said to themselves, it must be because there's still a lot of those bad eggs out there. Let's keep killing until we get it right. Do you know that Stalin would order a purge of a city, and he wouldn't say, go and kill all of the capitalists in Tsaritsyn. He'd say, go and kill 50,000 people in Tsaritsyn. He'd give them a number. Wasn't the number guilty? He'd just give them a number. Go kill 50,000 people. Kill the most likely 50,000 people. Not people who've committed a crime, but people who might have overseas relatives who are likely to commit crimes. Go kill them. And still it. Terror, 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 terror. What is the terror doing? The terror is allowing people to do what? To tell other people what to do and to take their stuff. Now, in brutal dictatorships like the Nazis and the communists, you have to use fear. Fear enforced by execution. We're far more sophisticated than that today. Far more sophisticated than that today. In order to get people to do what you want them to do today, to take their money, you don't have to use terror. That's so gauche. Very, very 20th century. Today, if you want to tell people what to do and take their money, you got to make them think it's for a higher good. The Nazis said it was for the good of the German race. The communists said it was good for the working class. Today they say it's for the good of the planet. Save the planet. You got to save the planet. You don't want the planet to die, do you? You don't want everything on the earth to die and your kids as well. You don't want that to happen. Right? I don't. I'm a strong conservative. I don't want the earth to die and all the children to catch fire before they're drowned by the rising sea level. I don't want that to happen. Sure, here, take my money and my freedom. They have to have a cover because it's magical thinking. It's all magical thinking. You have to have justification for it. So, think of it as a fig leaf. The Nazis had a fig leaf, we're doing this for the race. The communists had a fig leaf, we're doing it for the workers, for the common people. Today, the people that want to tell you what to do and take your money in exchange for that, say they do it for the planet. And in the same way that the Loch Ness Monster turns off people's critical thinking, the desire of good people, normal good Americans, to want to do something right, like save the planet, causes them to get into a set of magical thinking, and they turn their brains off. I'll give you two quick examples. Before I started doing this strange life of mine for a living, I worked as an editor on a show called Sunday Morning Shootout. It was a movie talk show on AMC with Peter Barton and Peter Gruber. We did 180 episodes, and I was about 3 episodes left. I was almost done, and I was getting some coffee in the morning at the break room. We had about 3 episodes to go, and this new hire came in. Now, this was 40 people on this production staff. 38 progressives, 2 conservatives, me and the guy who was the post-production supervisor. So they used to walk around our room so they didn't get to hear any of this stuff, and we don't have any of that happening. So I'm in the kitchen, and this woman comes up to me. I've never met her before in my life, 25-year-old woman. Walks up to me, she says, you must be that conservative editor I heard about. Well, what a charming introduction. Yes, I am. My name's Bill. What's your name? She didn't even tell me. Right out of her mouth, I'm not making this up, right out of her mouth, she said, so I suppose you don't want to save the environment then, huh? And I think about these things. So I just turned right back and said, what environment do you want to save? What do you mean? What environment do you want to save? The Earth has been 30 degrees centigrade hotter than it is now. It's been much, much colder than it is now. Carbon dioxide levels have been 3 times higher, not 20% higher, 3 times higher than they are now. They've been much lower than they are now. The center of the United States was under a mile of ice, then it was under 100 feet of water. Temperature's been hotter, colder, CO2 levels have been higher, lower. Which environment do you want to protect? Do you want to put a pin in the 2007 environment? Do you want to protect the 1954 environment? Do you want to protect the 1490 medieval warm front environment? Do you want to protect the environment of 600,000 years ago? What about 30 million years ago? What about 1 billion years ago? What environment do you want to protect? It's constantly in motion, it's constantly moving, it's never the same 2 days in a row. It's a beating heart. If you look at global climate temperatures going back to the beginning of the Earth, 4.5 billion years ago, you see it does this. But you want to put a heart You want to put a pin in this beat, and you want to just flatline the climate, so where do you want to put the pin? And she just turned and walked in again. Now, that is not a triumph of the awesomeness of Bill. There's nothing remarkable about what I said. It's a serious, legitimate, factual statement that had a question attached to it. But these people don't think about these things. They believe it because they know it's the right thing to believe. It gives them moral advantage. It gives them unearned moral superiority. She's a good person. She's saving the planet. I'm a bad person. I want the kids to die, catch fire, or drown. She's better than I am. And she's smarter than I am, too, because only Neanderthals believe in this whole thing. The science is settled. As it turns out about the science is settled, I got to meet in the course of my life, one of the great benefits of this strange life I found myself in, got to be very close friends with Burt Rutan. Burt Rutan was the guy who built the first around-the-world airplane in 1987, and Burt decided that America wasn't doing enough in space, so back in 2004, 2003, I guess, he said, you know what, I'm tired of building airplanes, I want to build a spaceship. I want to build a space program. So he did. So he built a space program. He built a suborbital vehicle and a vehicle to launch it. He built the ground crew, and he got Paul Allen to step up and put $25 million into it. And Burt took his best friend, a guy named Mike Melville, a 65-year-old South African friend who came to work for Burt 30 years ago and said, you get to be the first commercial astronaut off of you. He just did it. But Burt Rutan is an engineer. And unlike movie stars, let's say, if you make a movie that fails, you fail upward in Hollywood. I've seen it. If you drive through the heart of Hollywood, rocks begin to float up into the air and just keep going up into the sky. But if you're an engineer, especially an aeronautical engineer, if you make a mistake, people are going to die, and it's probably going to be your friends. So Burt Rutan understands how to analyze data. That's what he does for a living. He analyzes data. Burt lived in the most economically friendly house probably in the United States. He lived in a pyramid in the Mojave Desert, and he made it energy efficient because it was a challenge to him as an engineer. He didn't want to spend the money. He didn't have any, he just didn't want to spend the money. He thought it would be a fun thing to do. And so Burt was widely loved by the environmental community because he had such an incredibly eco-friendly house. Well, Burt Rutan started looking at the data that was coming back from the client probes. And he started getting in touch with other people because he was famous. He'd get to know some of these guys. And Burt says the data doesn't make any sense. There's no signal there. He would say things like, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s, 89 I guess it was, he said something like 1,500 temperature sensors in Siberia just went offline because there was no money to keep them going. And that meant that over 1,500 temperatures reporting cold temperatures were taken offline was updating global temperatures. Really, stuff that simple. And he would say, there's no signal here. The data doesn't make any sense. And the climatologists, the global warming people would say, well, what kind of climate research have you done? And Burt would say, I don't do research in climate. This is your data. It's not my data. It's your data that doesn't make any sense. So why is it that all of that, they said thousands of scientists working on climate change, but all of their data comes from 2 or 3 places, comes from NOAA, comes from East Anglia. Why is it that both NOAA and East Anglia have histories, proven histories, of fudging the data to make it warmer? If this is real, why isn't it real? In other words, if there is in fact a giant air-breathing plesiosaur in this lake, why do we have pictures of it? Where are the pictures? Why do we have to fake pictures? If Loch Ness Monster is real, why do I have to provide a Photoshop and a little model? If it's real, why not just show you the picture of the real thing? It turns out that signal is not there. So this doesn't make me a guy who hates the environment. It doesn't make me a guy who hates children. It makes me a guy who's looking for the truth. I want the truth. I want to know what's really happening. If the planet is genuinely warming out of control, I want to know it. I want to do something about it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And what I mentioned about the Loch Ness Monster comes back one more time because it's a very simple thing. The ability to turn off that mind of yours when there's something you want, when there's a magical outcome you want, like the ability to magically save the earth, or the ability to make you magically smarter and better than other people. I saw a documentary right around 2004 or 5 when this thing was really getting going. And it was on ABC News, I think. And it might have been Tom Brokaw or somebody else. It was one of the major network anchors. And there he was in front of the Arctic Ocean in a northern face kind of thing, all buffed up by his art department. And he's standing there, and the waves are lapping against the shore. And he turns to the camera, and this thing was promoted as, this is the climate catastrophe that's going to kill all your kids, you have to watch the show. Not exaggerating, and I'm not making this up. The first words out of this news anchor's mouth was, the last time that these waters were ice-free in August was 20 million years ago. Dun, dun, dun. And my immediate thought was, whose SUVs made it ice-free 20 million years ago? That was my first thought. Whose factories and whose carbon footprints made this water like this 20 million years ago? And nobody, including the guy who made that speech, seemed to understand the ridiculousness of what he was saying. If he had said that the ocean has never been ice-free in recorded history, that would have gotten my attention. But it's not what he said. 20 million years ago. Well, that's a long time. If you look at an interview with Truth, most of Al Gore's data, the deep data, goes back 600,000 years. 600,000 years. Well, that's 60% of a million years. 1,000 million years is a billion. And the Earth is 4,500 million years old. And you're telling me that 20 million years ago this condition existed as it exists today, and I'm supposed to get excited about this? It may be that there's something different today, but something caused it to be different 20 million years ago. He just told me. So if it happened 20 million years ago and we're still here, where's the crisis? Where's the drama? Where's the fear? Where's the control? Where's the tyranny? Where's it coming from? It doesn't exist. I'm not saying that global warming doesn't exist. I don't think it exists. I think the second they stop saying global warming and saying climate change, we lost the argument that instant. But what they're doing is they're using fear and they're using manipulation of a very subtle kind that's actually more powerful than fear. And it's called social proof. Psychologists talk about social proof and they say social proof is actually more powerful in many cases than fear. Social proof is just simply peer pressure. And what psychologists find is that the human desire to be doing what everybody else is doing is so great that people will do what everybody else is doing in contravention of their most deeply held beliefs. Mark Twain talked about social proof, and he talked about the moral courage it took to stand up to other people's opinions. He talked about a lynch mob in Missouri, where they were taking an innocent victim to be lynched, and there's 100 people on the streets. Twain said probably 97 of those 100 people not only didn't want to be there, they were revolted by being, but they didn't want to be seen friendly with this, they wanted to be seen badly by the neighbors, so they go along. But one man with moral courage, a sheriff or a marshal, maybe he's unarmed, standing in that street says, yeah, you can kill that guy, but you're going to have to kill me first. Gone. That's the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. Everybody believes it until a little boy says, he's naked. Doesn't slowly degrade after that. Gone. Gone, because your critical facilities come back. Moral proof tells you that if you don't believe this story, there's something wrong with you. You're an evil person, and you're a stupid person. The science is settled. Science isn't settled. But what it is tyranny. And I think the only way to describe it is, it's certainly not the tyranny of Stalin or Hitler or Robespierre. It's not based on murder, it's based on peer pressure. It's tie-dyed tyranny, is what it is. It's tie-dyed tyranny. It's the tyranny of those weenies, you know? It's the tyranny of the student council. It's all those guys who maybe wanted to start a business, or maybe they wanted to do this or wanted to do that. It's the tyranny of guys that dream about having, you know, the homecoming queen in the back of the car after prom night, but don't. And so they decide that they're just going to sit and dream about things. It's the tyranny of people that can't do anything really and take other people's wealth. They take stuff from the people who can do things because they can't. And they can't just take your stuff. And here in Washington, I heard 15 stories coming up here about the permits. You want to move a bush on your property 5 miles off the road? Where's your permit? And if you cut that bush down, you are going to have to replant the bush. Then you can go pay the permit. Then you can remove the bush. That kind of thing. It's tyranny. It's telling other people what to do. It's a genetic defect that some people have, telling other people what to do. And here, they're charging you for it. $48,000 in permits to start a business or just to make changes in your property? We're paying people to tyrannize us. We're paying these tie-dyed weenies to take our money and tell us what to do. And it's dangerous for all the reasons we outlined. If you don't think it's dangerous, ask the guy who was in the water because they couldn't change a sign on a bridge, or ask the people that are looking at that giant hole in Seattle where this giant multi-billion-dollar machine is parked for eternity. Those are the people that want to run your lives. It's bad news, man. It's bad news. And when we come back from our intermission, we're going to talk about some local cases of bad news. We've got a couple of really special guests. We've got a little set that you've never had before. So why don't we take a 10-15-minute break, go out and get liquored up. My audience is a lot better than you are. We'll be back in 10 minutes, and you don't want to be late. I'm just telling you, you don't want to be late back in, because those of you who are fans of the Stratosphere Lounge know we start every show we do with I Know a Place by Petula Clark, but I want you to know where I found that song, so if you get back in time, you're going to see a video that was made in 1979 that changed my life, and might change yours as well. Thanks for joining us. Nobody leave. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Every day when the work is behind you and the shop and the store put the lock on the door, just get away where your worries won't find you. If you like, well, I'll tell you more. Don't let the day get the better of you. When the evening comes, there's so much to do. You better put on your best and wear a smile. Just come along with me a while, 'cause I tell you, I know a place where the music is fine and the lights are always low. I know a place where we can go. At the door there's a man who will greet you. Then you go downstairs to some tables and chairs. Soon I'm sure you'll be tapping your feet, because the beat is the greatest there. All around there are girls and boys. It's a swinging place, a cellar full of noise. It's got an atmosphere of its own somehow. You gotta come along right now, 'cause I tell you, I know a place where the music is fine and the lights are always low. I know a place where we can go. All around there are girls and boys. It's a swinging place, a cellar full of noise. It's got an atmosphere of its own somehow. You gotta come along right now, 'cause I tell you, I know a place where the music is fine and the lights are always low. I know a place where we can go. I know a place where we can go. I know a place where the lights are low. You're gonna love this place, I know. I know a place where we can go.
Well, hello again. That was a wonderful film. We are going to have Bill Whittle back here again with Glenn Morgan, who is a property rights director from the Freedom Foundation. He is a fifth-generation Washingtonian, and he's famous for being sued in federal court by a 35,000-year-old warrior. Also joining Glenn Morgan will be Ed Kilduff. And Ed is a hydrogeologist from San Juan County, a keen observer and critic of environmental hypocrisy. So, here they are. Yep.
Oh, wow. I enjoy long walks on the beach in Tuxedo. Sometimes I just hop on my Harley to take a little spin around my multi-million-dollar mansion. You can't go wrong with an 80 game. I really want to talk to these guys for a minute, and it's really fun to do something a little different. But before we get started, I just have to say one thing about that video you just saw. Right around the time I lost the chance to be a fighter pilot, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to get in an F-100 Super Sabre, push to supersonic speeds, shoot down communists, fly space shuttles, command a Mars mission. That's what I was supposed to be doing. But I got into film, got into movies, and that would be right around 1979, which is the year that Animato just came out. And I just wanted to talk about it just very, very quickly, because I do a show, a live webcast every week, or try to, called the Stratosphere Lounge, the theme song is I Know a Place by Petula Clark. And a lot of people ask me, how'd you find that song? Well, it's perfect for what I want. I want a sense of like an underground place where people can kind of hang out and relax people. But I first heard that song on that video. And I know a lot of younger people might look at this and go, but every single frame of that, 30 of them every second, was done by a guy named Mike Jigla by hand. And I remember watching that projected on the screen on 16mm, and I lost my mind. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And digital technology now is so amazing that you could probably make that film in about an hour or two, you know, with just a couple of keyframes here and there, import some stuff in Photoshop. But Mike Jigla was a genius, and I love that song so much, and I thought I'd share that with you guys because it is an absolutely amazing piece of work, and it's a small indication of how far things are going. But anyway, here we are, and I had a chance to talk with Glenn on the way up and hear 2 hours of true tales of woe. And Ed I don't know so well, but we're gonna get to know him in a minute. And we thought we might spend a half an hour or so talking about local problems and see if there's a common sense resistance answer to some of these things that are plaguing you here in Bellingham, Washington. So, Glenn, you got a great lead story, although it's gruesome.
Well, it kind of came up in the intro there. So I am in federal court, and I am being sued by a 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior named Ramtha, who has traveled through space and time, violating the laws of physics and common sense, to leap through the mouth of Jay-Z Knight, who happens to sit on Barack Obama's re-election steering committee, and preach hatred of all kinds of things, and donate heavily to the Democrat Party, one of the largest donors in the Democrat Party. And we were talking about magical thinking before, and I think sometimes, you know, the question is, what does it take to believe that a 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior can actually is somebody that you want to give a lot of money to, and who you would take political advice from? But it really, when we were just talking about this, it does make perfect sense that they would also be on Barack Obama's steering committee. So, and it is funny, and we do laugh about these things. But there's a bully and behind a lot of these people, and that's why she's it's kind of hard to define exactly who. But one of them is suing me in federal court. But it's because what we did is expose the truth, simply exposing the truth about what somebody like this actually believes. And I want to kind of apologize just in advance. I have a little video clip. People have probably heard about this. Millions of dollars have been spent to suppress these videos all over the internet, and a little video clip, and it's offensive. We were not able to censor a couple words out. It's very short, but I only want to play this so that you understand exactly who it is that we sometimes have to face on the other side. And so if you do not want to hear, it's very short, and I don't know if there's any kids in the audience, but if you want to plug their ears just for a few seconds here, I want to show that this is the type of person who believes in enlightenment, who believes in inner peace, right, freedom, all these wonderful, new agey sort of things, but yet this is what she actually tells people.
Or in fact, God's chosen people. God's chosen people. I think they have earned enough cash to pay their way out of the goddamn gas chambers by now. And you can only ride past so far.
You know, and that's enough. I mean, it's something horrific that she said about Jews, right?
Yeah, made enough cash to buy their way out of the gas chambers by now.
Yep, and
you don't often get to see that kind of actual, genuine, raw, unrefined anti-Semitism out in the open that much. But F the Jews.
Right.
They've got enough cash to buy their way out of the gas chambers by now.
Right.
So this clip got out there.
Right.
She was given a severe scolding by the Democratic Party, and then immediately readmitted to all of these positions of power.
Yeah, and then and worse things were said about Catholics and Mexicans and even the organic farmers, which was the bridge too far for the Democrat Party. But after that, she gave a lot more money to the Democrat Party, and now they're formally coming out and saying this is a good Democrat.
Ed, I have a question for you. He's being sued in federal court because she claims that because she was channeling Ramtha,
right,
that's copyrighted material.
That's right.
And it's not her speaking.
Right.
You have taken copyrighted material from a guy 35,000 years ago.
That's right, it's Ramtha.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, if it were me, I would say, no, I'm channeling the guy who's 36,000 years old. Grandpa stole it from me 1,000 years later, and I actually am countersuing for intellectual infringement. What do you do with this? What do you do with this, Ed? When you've got people making this claim?
We just have to fight it. In fact, I was going to ask, when did you file a lawsuit? Was that 35,000 years ago?
It just, yeah, through space and time.
So can I ask you something? Because I think this is really interesting. I don't know who brought this up. It might be Carl Sagan, but it was or the Amazing Randy or somebody. But what somebody said about this idea that she's channeling a 35,000-year-old warrior. If you ask him about what the secret to love is, he'll tell you. If you ask him how do people get along, he'll tell you. If you ask him how are things going in the Pleiades right now, he'll tell you. But what he can't tell you is, he can't tell you how he made the hut he lived in. He can't tell you what kind of food he hunted and how he hunted it. He can't tell you how they prepared their meals. He can't tell you where he lived and how he built his house. None of the things that actually happened 35,000 years ago he can tell you. And if I appeared 35,000 years in the future, I could do 35 years of nonstop narration about what life in the 21st century is like.
No, that's exactly right. In fact, I heard one person who's critical of people who talk about past lives say that everybody in past lives seems to have been a princess or a warrior or somebody.
Shirley MacLaine, yeah, she's a princess. Never a slave who died at 12 or something in a galley accident. Wow.
Exactly.
So you guys have a lot of this to deal with up here.
Yeah. A lot of interesting folk on the other side.
I actually pride myself on the ability to construct a message that's accessible to people, that kind of circumvents all the stuff, kind of goes right to the heart, kind of the emotional appeal. But I have to tell you, I was coming up here and listening to Glenn talk about some of his campaigns, and I mean seriously, I bow down before you, Ramtha Slayer. You are an absolute genius at this beautiful thing. And he came up with a term that I like so much. I think I'm going to, with his permission, do the next firewall about it. Tell us about what you called some of these people up here in Wines Across.
So you know, and some of you, yeah, that's right. So some of you,
it's actual genius.
So some of you have heard when we talk about the environmental movement, right? They always want to call themselves environmentalists because it sounds good, it sounds nice, it sounds friendly, it's warm and fuzzy, it's the pocket gopher butterflies, and, you know, and rainbows. But what it really is it's bullying, and it's gangrene, right? Gangrene, and gangrene has become the government staph infection that we all know, right? But we've all had to deal with it. We've all had to go to the permit counter. Everybody in this room at one point in time has interacted with local government or state government or federal government, and you know what I'm talking about. It's become infected. And I joke about it as being a staph infection, and gangrene is oftentimes who's behind it. And I can tell you that nobody is actually more experienced on the ground level than Ed here, who's seen quite a bit of it in San Juan.
Well, we all know that it's really not about the environment in many cases. It's really about money and control and power. I've been an environmentalist, environmental consultant for many years now, and I know it's a business. And so people are looking to gain power and increase their own money. And it's about self-interest, and it has nothing to do with the environment in many cases.
So you're an actual professional scientist.
I am.
Is it harder to become an actual professional scientist, or to be somebody who has an opinion without being a professional scientist?
Well, you know, that's really interesting. It's harder, much harder to be an actual professional scientist, but in many ways, not a successful route these days as people who try to go the other route. In fact, you know, you can get grants, and there are grants being given out purely for messaging. We have found documentation many times about grants coming from the federal government and other places purely to message a particular thing that Puget Sound is in trouble. No science behind it, just a message.
Do you run into this kind of magical thinking that I was talking about? I mean, you take an obvious case like the Ranford thing. Okay. But, I mean, you must just constantly run into people who passionately believe in things that just aren't so. And that there's no evidence for whatsoever. How do you do that without losing your mind?
I do run into those people very often. You know, it's really the interplay between this magical thinking and just raw self-interest hidden by the sticky of these good social issues. And many people who really maybe have genuinely good intentions but believe in magical thinking get manipulated by people who are really out for their self-interest. So it's this interplay that is really interesting to see.
That's something I'd like to ask you about, because you told me all kinds of just blood-curdling stories on the way up here. But really, it is this kind of tie-dye tyranny, right? Really what it is it's people who have this genetic defect. They're not happy unless somebody else is unhappy. If there's somebody out there who's being left alone and happy and on their own and doing just fine, they can't sleep at night until they get their claws on that person. And you were telling me stories about a guy who, on his own property, let's say, the pond, right?
Yeah, Joe.
Just tell us about this.
Yeah. Joe Reminar, and this is one of your neighbors, right? He lives in Whatcom County, and some of you have seen the Freedom Foundation. We've done these Tales of Tyranny stories, and we started doing these last year because everywhere I went in Washington State, there were people being harmed. And the reason why we tell these personal stories is that that's the way to connect to people. People can understand that. And when we tell stories about science sometimes and the facts and figures, people glaze over their eye. They don't connect to that. But when you tell a personal story, it actually changes people's minds sometimes about issues. And Joe Reminar wanted to build a pond in his backyard so that he could observe the wildlife and build some habitat. It's an evil thought, I know. And he did it without government grants. He actually did it himself. He actually paid for it himself, built it himself. It's on his property. It didn't interfere with the stream. And for that crime against bureaucracy, he had to be punished. And Whatcom County did. They punished him greatly. And I think that those are the types of stories that we find all over, just pointless, ridiculous harassment. And, no good deed goes unpunished.
I mean, one example of pointless, ridiculous harassment that stands out for me in San Juan County is an 80-ish-year-old woman wanted to retire. She had a bed and breakfast. And in order to sell to some potential buyers, it had to remain as a bed and breakfast. But the Friends of the San Juans intervened and prevented it from being continuing as a B&B because they felt somehow that harmed the environment. So these things really are just so far away from what most people would think are legitimate environmental issues.
But there's something that you both talked about that I really think is the entire point here. You mentioned the term fig leaf, and that's exactly what it is. It's an interesting term, fig leaf, because if you think about fig leaf and where it came from, you go back to Adam, and you go back to the garden, and you go back to the state of natural innocence and perfection, and you're living a life without sin. But really what it is they're using this desire that every rational person in this country shares. It's not a rational person in the world, conservative or liberal, that wants to see mercury being dumped into rivers, that wants to see their children burned to a crisp before they drown with rising. There's not a rational, decent person alive who doesn't want to live in a clean and healthy environment. And what they're using that affinity for what is essentially you can't demonize life on Earth, although you probably can, we'll get to that in a minute, but they're using this as a fig leaf to cover their own venality. And what you were saying earlier, Glenn, is so important, because you were saying in the case of this guy with the pond, that what would have happened, what they really wanted was, he made the pond not so that he could process his tannery or grow his tobacco, or, he made the pond so that he could create a habitat for wildlife. And you said what the state really wants is they want him to fill the pond in, fill it in, get it back exactly the way it was before, then go down and get the permit, and once he paid the permit, then not only could he go and do exactly what he did before, but they probably would pay him to go and do what he did before. So the operational point here is not about the environment, and it's not even about the revenues. It's about compliance. It's about you will take a knee to these people. You will take a knee. You don't get to do what you want to do on your own property anymore in this state or in much of this country. You can do everything you wanted to do, but you have to come through us first. You have to get our permission, and you have to pay us thousands of dollars, and then you can go do whatever you want to do. They didn't say you have to get rid of this pond because it's bad for the environment. They said you have to get rid of the pond because you didn't ask us, and you didn't pay us to put this pond in on your own property. But if you do get on your knee and beg us for permission and pay us for the privilege, then we'll send you some funds to do exactly what you did on your own.
And that's what we call that, just in order to save the environment, you have to destroy it first. And that's a similar phrase to what we heard back in the Vietnam War, that whole they parodied back, and that they do it all the time now. And so that's the kind of thing that we see. And a lot of times we call it stifling human ingenuity. I mean, this is planning to stifle human ingenuity at every step of the way.
I mean, these days, just recently, this new law passed in San Juan County, you need a conditional use permit to enter into new agriculture. I mean, people were talking about that 10 years ago as sort of the nightmare scenario, and now it's reality in San Juan County. To farm, you need a conditional use permit.
It's nice to have an actual scientist here, because one of the things that the environmentalists trot out all the time is, well, the science is settled. We hear this to the science is settled. 9,000 people, 9,000 leading climatologists believe X, Y, and Z, and so on. Bert Rutan, as I mentioned, is very critical of this whole thing. He said, whatever that number is, it says 900 people, 900 climate scientists out of 1,000, agreed with the statements of the EP, or whatever is that agency. But basically, Bert said, well, how does they get that number? Well, it turns out that those were the number of people that they mailed the form to. And only 400 of the 900 returned the form, and only 30 of the 400 that returned the form had read everything in the article, and only 7 of those agreed with everything in the article. And that's how they get the number. So I wanted to ask you, as a scientist, as a professional scientist, I've been an amateur scientist, and this idea of skeptic being a term of derision, that's the entire scientific method right there, is skepticism. If it's true, nature will show me. This idea that skepticism of scientific results is a bad thing is not just unscientific, it's anti-scientific.
One of the worst things that's come about in this entire process is this belief in consensus. And it kind of rules the day in many situations when it comes to environmental stuff, and it's very destructive for truth. I don't know what to say about it, but it is just so pervasive in regulatory agencies now that they want to have consensus about everything. But it just drives out all the skeptics, and it means that anybody who dissents is somehow non-compliant. We're talking about compliance before. It's political and bureaucratic compliance. It's not regulatory compliance at all, and that's what they're striving for, is this bureaucratic consensus kind of compliance.
So if there's a scientific opinion that's in favor of them stealing your money and telling you what to do, then we have the science is settled and we must bow to the scientific consensus. But if there's scientific data saying anything other than what they want you to do, then you're a knuckle-dragging skeptic denier who must be banished to the rows beyond the corn, where an appropriately evil fate will befall you.
Oh yes, I've had people from the Department of Ecology want to file complaints with the Geology Board and other registration boards that are on registry, purely because I disagreed with them. They felt that was unethical and unprofessional conduct.
There's a, you want to talk about science? Let's talk about some science. You were telling me on the way up, it's certainly been my experience, and I'll bet it's been, many of you had this experience too with progressives or really, advanced cases of like virulent progressivism, untreated for long periods of time. You'll find that there's not only an enormous amount of actual genuine hatred, but if you get deep enough, you will actually, you said you can counter diagram, you will actually see grown adults put their hands over their ears and rock back and forth when they're hearing something that they don't want to hear. And I'd really like to get your take on this, because there is in fact a physiological reaction going on. That's what people do when they are severely stressed. Abused children sit in the corner and rock, and people have been tortured and beaten. And when they start rocking, they're in real psychological distress. So why would just a discussion about these issues put these people in this position? And there's a really interesting theory out there that basically says there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and the amygdala is the threat sensor. Now liberals will say that conservatives apparently do have a larger amygdala than liberals. And that I know. But they will say that you see, you conservatives live in fear. But what the amygdala does is it doesn't generate fear. What the amygdala does is it's what connects the stimulus to the response. So if you're walking down a pathway in the middle of the night, let's say, and you hear a couple of snapping twigs and a rustle of leaves, and a mountain lion jumps on your back, if you survive the experience, it's the amygdala that says, next time you hear the snapping twigs, you don't have to wait for the cat to appear on your back. It's a threat assessment center. It says, run. Run. As a matter of fact, that snapping twig thing is so powerfully built into us, hardwired into us, that sound editors in Hollywood, in vampire movies, will put a snapping twig sound right when they want you to get free, just because it scares you on some primal level. But what I think is happening when they're rocking is they're having that threat assessment, that they feel a tremendous threat to themselves. And the best thing I ever heard about this was the fundamental psychology between conservatives and progressives is conservatives would rather have the threat assessment and the amygdala discomfort now, and progressives would rather have it later. So we say things like, if we don't do something about ISIS, they're going to come over here. This is freaking bad news. And liberals are like, well. But we say, better to fight it now and try to prevent it than to see what happens, because when it happens, you get an amygdala response like watching the World Trade Center fall down. And everybody in this room knows how that hits you, right? So we take a little worry early to try to prevent a lot of pain later, but they don't seem to be able to process this at all.
Well, one thing related to that is I've found that people are almost in love with bad news. They love to think bad things, especially in the environmental arena. One disaster over another is good news. It's sort of a schadenfreude thing. And one quote that I really love that I've said over and over, and people may have heard me say it before, is Peter Grillo, who's the head scientist for the Nature Conservancy, says that if Martin Luther King were an environmental activist instead of a civil rights activist, he would have given an I Have a Nightmare speech instead of I Have a Dream. And I think that really summarizes the approach of a lot of people. They really want to believe these dire, horrible things.
So when you're in this political fight, and you see, so we really have that, you have that tremendous 1-2 psychological punch that progressives are putting on the table here. On one hand, they're putting out the moral superiority of just wanting to save the planet. And who really is going to argue with that? The science is on our side, we're just trying to save the planet. Who's going to have the moral courage to say, hey, I'm in favor of saving the planet too, I just think your data's wrong, I think your conclusion's wrong. So they have that unearned moral superiority and all the social proof and the peer pressure, that's the left. And then they got that right uppercut, which is, and by the way, if you don't do what we tell you to do, everybody's going to die.
Right. And we will come in and crush you. Yeah, I mean, that's usually the next step.
Those are for the repulsive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The guys like you who don't have the common sense to just take me in the beginning and just let them have their way.
Yeah, and I think it's something. The other thing is this: it's easy for them oftentimes to focus on these intangibles, like the world's going to end in 100 years because sea levels are going to rise ½ an inch. And we saw that recently with Governor Inslee. There was a hearing down in Seattle a couple months ago, and a citizen got up at this public hearing in Seattle and said, Governor Inslee, our sewage lines have broken several times here in Kitsap County. We've dumped 1 million gallons of raw sewage into Puget Sound, and what are you going to do about that as governor? And now, a smarter politician would have basically continued on just to the next friendly environmentalist. But Inslee couldn't help himself. He was in a friendly environment, group of people there, and he had to step in and he said, we'll fix that, but first I'm going to solve global climate change. Yeah.
Your tax dollars will work.
Yeah, your tax, and your governor has priorities. So they don't want to fix, because fixing sewage leaks is not exciting, it's not fancy, it's get down dirty and fixing, and it actually requires engineering. It requires achieving something tangible, and that's dirty and messy. Let's just pass it off, and let's focus on someday the glaciers are going to melt, and that's our government. Yeah.
Do you run into that, Ed? Do you run into? Because look, I think a huge number of people that go along with these policies. I mean, 99% of the people that vote for this kind of stuff do this for perfectly good reasons. They do it because they're genuinely worried. They do it because they're genuinely concerned. But it's hard to escape the conclusion that the people like the governor and other people like we saw earlier are fully aware that this is a form of tyranny, that we're not going to use rifles and we're not going to use executions because it's just not done these days. But we will scare people and we will motivate them the same way that the French did during the French Revolution and the Nazis did and the communists did. All the good people are doing this, and those of you who are not good people will have an appointment in the basement. And that is so powerful to act on people, it's almost impossible to circumvent it. But we don't want people to go home depressed. Well, more depressed than usual. I mean, just all you have to do is open your browser. They hit bottom? No, they got a lot of digging left to do. But what is a bright light in this is that it really is true that you cannot generate darkness. They don't have a darkness generator that they can lower into the room and project the light out of the place. That everything that these people achieve, they achieve only through the lack of resistance to their encroachment. Ed, you guys want to say that?
I completely agree with that. And honestly, I have to say, after having worked in several states, especially a long time in California, I really do believe Washington is worse than most places. But a really gratifying thing is that there's been a lot of local resistance that's emerged, at least from what I can see in the past 5 or so years, and it's really beginning to make a difference and make a change. But I personally cannot believe how bad the regulatory agencies are here in Washington and how much they act like bullies.
bullies. And bullies have, you know, there are people who are victims of bullies. I was victimized by bullies. That's what got me into physics, because I wanted to figure out a way to put the 20 megatons of bright light freedom right over their heads. But look, bullies only succeed because a bully is like any other predator. If you think about this, it's really profound. Not many people get down to this, but a lion has to survive every encounter it has with a gazelle more or less intact. Because if that gazelle uses its horns or knocks a fang loose out of that lion's done. Predators pick on the weak because they can't afford to pick on the strong. Because if they pick on the strong and they take damage, they're out of business. They don't get to eat anymore. They're done. And so bullies automatically, they're wired to look for the weak and for the sick and the old. And when you stand up to a bully, it does something, it short-circuits their brain. And they realize, oh, I can't get away with this. I thought I could, but I can't. This thing is kicking me back. I better back off, because if I lose one of my fangs in this fight, I'm done. And so people need to fight back, because these people will stop if you push back. They will leave you alone. They'll not only leave you alone, they'll leave everybody alone. But it takes moral courage. And this is something Mark Twain talked about, as I mentioned earlier. It's like, if you are dealing with Stalin or Hitler, and he is enforcing your behavior, if he's enforcing your compliance to his behavior through machine guns, then that requires physical courage. But when they're using peer pressure and fear, it requires moral courage. And folks, we should be very grateful that that's all it requires, because frankly, I'd rather go stand in a city hall meeting than try to face the KGB on a dark night or the Gestapo. So it really is just a question of standing up, and you've told so many stories. We've all run into this, how unbelievably fragile their worldview is, and how easy it is to flip students. When you were talking about a kid as a young Republican. You can flip people just by simply saying, this is what we believe, we're not asking you to believe it, this is what I believe, and here's why. People, I've never heard this before. You just turn thousands of people that way.
You know, and I think that's a lot of what we see on the progressive side, whether it's environmentalists or socialists or whatever that side is. What they believe largely exists in a vacuum because they've never actually heard the other side. That's the only way that you can believe something that's demonstrably false, is because nobody's ever bothered to tell the truth or show you the truth. And so, and many of you know, some of you know me, I went to Columbia University, and I didn't see Obama there either. But, you know, the thing is, I was a conservative activist at Columbia. That's a hard place to be a conservative activist. And it's not because there's anything special about me, but because I bothered to just be the guy who got upset when I was having to fight my way through the protesters between classes, and got together with other students of like-minded students, and pretty soon, you know, the two people that admitted to be college Republicans initially, eventually became 300 by the time I graduated. And that wasn't an accident, it's just that suddenly somebody was willing to go and do stuff. And when they would have a hunger strike, we would have a barbecue, you know, right next to it. And so, yeah, you know, you think about that, right? That's not hard. That's not facing the fire hoses, that's not facing the attack dogs,
Exactly.
That's not facing the machine guns, that's having a barbecue. And it's funny, and I think we don't use humor enough on our side, and we need to use more of it, because this stuff should be ridiculed. And it begs to be ridiculed. And so, you know, anything we can do to shine the light of day and ridicule the other side and go where they don't expect us, Evergreen College, Huxley College, just down the street, get there and just get the opportunity to expose them to the truth. I've seen it happen before, and you'll see it more in the future. They start to question what they've been told for so long, and they will change.
Yes, and as you start to speak out and stand up to these people, you find your own peer group. That's basically what you're saying, and I've seen it happen over and over again. And actually, the Freedom Foundation's just done a wonderful job of supporting local groups in getting their first steps, and that's really the hardest part. But once you get rolling, you find all sorts of people.
It's just that simple. And I was at an event a couple years ago in Phoenix with Tammy Bruce, who's a conservative radio talk show host and got to be a friend of mine. Tammy Bruce wasn't just a liberal; she was a really radical progressive chairman of the National Organization of Women, Feminist and Lesbian. And one day, somebody said something, and she started thinking about things. And the next thing you know, she's a conservative champion. But we were coming out of an event, and she said, "Does it ever shock you, Bill, how easy it is to flip so many of these people? Because really, all you just have to do is say, here's what I believe." And the fundamental, you'd be amazed, you can get people 80% of the way by showing a little bit of humor, a little bit of self-deprecation, and a little bit of what appeals to them as reason. For example, when I talk about healthcare and a private solution to healthcare, the first thing I will say is, listen, if healthcare really were free, then I'd be a progressive, because there's not a rational, decent human being in the world who wouldn't want to give everybody all of this stuff if it were genuinely free. What kind of a rotten, evil bastard would say, here's all this free healthcare, but you can't have any? Well, that's what they think we believe. And if you just come out and say, of course I'd be a progressive about healthcare if healthcare were free, but it's not free, and then off you go. And people, it gets them out of their trenches. I'm friends with Adam Baldwin, who some of you may know is on Firefly as an actor, great actor. Really brilliant guy. Really brilliant guy. He always plays this muscle-bound, nutcase who just shoots first and asks questions later. But Baldwin reads the kind of stuff that the Federalist Papers were based on. He's an incredibly deep guy. And he started telling me this stuff back in 2008. And I'd like to see if I get a comment on this from both of you guys. He said, Bill, one of the most important things you can do if you're going to win an argument with people is, number one, you can get out of the labels, which is helpful. That's why I call my movement the common sense resistance. That's got two things going for it. If you don't like that, you got to be against common sense, but common sense sounds democratic. Common sense is just reason. Anybody can make this argument, and resistance especially appeals to progressives in that sense of image. We're speaking truth to power. And I'll come back to that in a second, truth to power. But Adam said also you have to give people honorable ground to retreat to. And I thought that's really important. Because if you make this about their personal identity, like I'm a conservative, I'm right, and you're a progressive, and you're wrong, they'll fight to the death because their egos are involved. But if you can get out of the trenches to the degree where you can say, if healthcare were free, I'd be on your side of this fight. But it's not free. We both know it's not. So it gives them honorable ground to retreat to. But what we were talking about a second ago there, you see that all the time.
Yeah, you do, and I think it's important to remember that we have to speak truth to power. The powerful are those who are arrayed, on the other side of us.
Say, give me the whole thing then.
Yeah.
Well, no, come on. Wind it up. Let me hear it.
Question authority, speak truth to power, and confront them where they think they're safe. And tell the other side that when you go on campus, tell them this, and you'll find is that students, even evergreen students, I've been there and done it, and they will change their mind, and pretty soon they're in the conservative student group.
Because we're questioning authority. We're speaking truth to power. You're the man. We're not the man. I'm just a guy here at a microphone. You're the people with the brass nameplates. You're the state. You're the authority. You're the man. I'm just a simple guy with his fist in the air speaking truth to power. And all of a sudden, their entire image is inverted, and they realize, holy crap, I'm on the side of my dad. I'm an authority figure. My entire psychology is about rebelling against my dad. And look at those guys up there who are demanding licensing. They're all my dad. They're sitting behind a big desk with their name plates on them.
I know a number of, at least on environmental issues, a number of genetic Democrats who have been abused just like anybody else has been abused before they ever changed their opinion pretty quickly. Yeah. And used to enforce how the situation where the other side, so to speak, starts giving purity tests. You're not really a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. That's right.
That was it. When people have been associated with the Freedom Foundation who have a Democrat, or who've been part of the Democrat Party, they get excommunicated from the party. Brian Sontag was excommunicated from the Democrat Party for daring, after getting more votes than any other Democrat politician in the history of Washington State. And you think about that. That man actually got more votes than any other Democrat, more than Obama, more than anybody, more than Jimmy Carter, it's not saying much, but more than anybody in Washington State. And when he left as an honorable auditor in the state of Washington, and he said, I want to join the Freedom Foundation, they immediately excommunicated him, and it's the purity test. You see it all the time.
I think one of the great developments in Washington State, frankly, was the Roadkill Caucus and its ability to work across aisles.
Yeah, and they excommunicated those Democrats too. And we just felt like if we could get more of them to join the Freedom Foundation, pretty soon there'd be a Republican majority in the legislature.
Well, yeah. we'll close with one thing here, and then we've got a little special surprise, and then I'll just wrap up with a couple thoughts. But we've been talking all night about magical thinking, and we've been talking about how if you look at the psychology of the French revolutionaries, if you look at the psychology of the German, the Gestapo and the security apparatus, if you look at the psychology of the Chekists and all of the people who are enforcing purity in that system, when you have a philosophy that appeals to people who want to tell other people what to do, And if that requires a belief in something that's not here, that's magical, or that's coming, in other words, we can lie about this because it's all for the greater future, the glorious dawning future of whatever is coming, the greater truth, the greater belief. What you find about people with that kind of mindset is they're extremely narrow-minded. There's traitors everywhere. There's enemies of the state everywhere. This person's not quite as pure as I am. This person needs to be excommunicated. And the thing I wanted just to close with you guys is you can actually use that as a weapon against them. There's a great story about how they were able to really hurt the terror network of Carlos the Jackal, who many of you know was a big famous terrorist in the 70s and early 80s. And Carlos, unlike Al-Qaeda, Carlos the Jackal ran an incredibly tight security. And the people that were trying to bring down his terror network tried to get people inside, but they couldn't because he kept his cards so close. He didn't let anybody in. So what they did was, what the good guys did was they said, he's so suspicious, he's so careful, we're going to use that against him. So what they did was, they took known associates of Carlos, who were 100% terrorists and 100% loyal to him. They knew they'd never turn these people. They've been trying for 5 years. And what they would do is they'd get them out in the marketplace or something, and they'd get a couple of people who were like well-known CIA agents, and they'd just walk up and start talking to them. Hey, how's it going? What do you mean? How's it going? Just wondering how you're doing. Why are you talking to me? Well, I just thought I'd chat about the weather. And what happened was, Carlos found out that his key operatives were talking to the CIA, and the network was destroyed because Carlos killed his own people. He executed his own people. He just was convinced, because of this suspicion and this nastiness, he was convinced that they were talking to the CIA. So one by one, he took them out. He took his own network out. And I think we were talking about coming up, I think we'll close with this, we have a special gift, but this idea of using that kind of psychology against people, what we really should do is find the biggest, nastiest eco-weenie, the person who's making the most money from these permits, and we ought to just basically, you know, leave like a Rush Limbaugh book, like on the hood of their car, or something. And I'll go up and walk up to him and I'll say, man, I gotta tell you, I haven't laughed so hard in 100 years. Who's that guy? Bill Whittle. Wait a minute, hold on a second. And then they start, next thing you know, they're going to put that little bubble against us, excommunicate them out of the fight, and we're home free.
Yeah.
So, you guys have prepared a little something. Is it going to be raffled off?
Yeah, it's supposed to be an Obama survival guide, and if they bring it up here, we can tell you what that is, and I hope everybody filled out form. Oh, here we go. So this is the Obama survival guide.
Let's put it on the table
and
lift up the items.
We'll
lift up the items one at a time.
There's all kinds of things that you're going to need to survive the Obama apocalypse coming. And there's alcohol, of course, that usually helps you kind of get through the day.
That's not enough. I need medically induced coma. I just went to the hospital during the hours after the election, and when I awoke, it was
that's 2013. There's the bell to you know, sound the alarm, because you won't have power.
That's your service for you, too.
There's a few good books that you should read. The Morality of Capitalism, always a classic. And the Pocket State and Federal Constitution. They may not be following it anymore, but it's there for posterity's sake.
You can get this from the Free Foundation.
I've seen people pick that up and their skin just burst into flames.
Yeah. There's earplugs.
This is very important.
Yeah. So when you don't need to hear what they have to say, or when they don't want to hear you, you can always hand it out to them. There's a mask if you just want to put your blinders on.
Honestly, folks, this is the only way I get through the day. I wake up, first thing I do is put the mask on, put the earplugs in, then I check the Drudge Report, and I can bear it.
Then there's the eraser. Oops. So there's a lot of mistakes that need to be erased.
Big eraser, small pencil.
Yeah. There's, what do we got here? We got, there's a magnifying glass in case you want to see your shrinking rights. Or read the fine print in Obamacare. There's, we've got some 5-hour energy in case you need to make a run for it. And petroleum jelly, we all know what that's for.
Is that going to be enough, really?
I don't know. This is just a start.
We got 2.5 years left.
It's not a comprehensive thing here, so.
Do you have a backpack-mounted thing of petroleum jelly, something the size that the guys carry in the compound, the 5, 6, 7, 8 gallons?
That's the size we actually need. Oh, and then there's paring knives if you go to cut your budget. So.
Okay.
And you forgot the gas.
Oh, and yeah, Gas X. So everybody needs that. This will help you get through at least a day or so of the Obama apocalypse.
And it goes to?
It goes to, we're going to do a drawing here. I'm going to have to hand off the mic. So Bill, we'll let you do the honors here.
Okay. And the winner is?
The winner is?
Bill Whittle from Los Angeles, California. Well, I'm deeply flattered and honored. It's actually Jerry Reed. Jerry, are you here?
Jerry,
you're still with us?
Come on up, Jerry.
Jerry, you around?
All right, there he is.
Keep motion up around the right. Come up here and claim the badge of honor.
That's right.
Well, folks, you know, everybody's problems, local problems are local problems. That's why they call them local. But if you really get them down to it, thank you, Jerry. Thanks for playing along. We hope you use it in good health. And that's me. Don't forget that. I think that's to finish the evening here. Local problems are local, and that's why they're called local. But the fact is that when you get down to the heart of local problems, virtually all the local problems are symptoms of the larger problems. And they're just a different flavor. So I'm going to go wrap up with 10 minutes of talk, but I just want to tell you how much fun I've had and enjoyed talking to you guys. It's great to talk to an actual real scientist, and it's especially great to talk to a guy who is a political special forces operative who goes deep into the enemy here, blows up bridges and ammo dumps. Thank you both very much for joining us. It's a great having you here. And I'm going to see you make some sense out of it. There is a common theme that runs through all of this stuff. And just so we're crystal clear, because it's important to be clear, clarity is important. When we talk about things like the environment, we are reasonable people. We don't want mercury dumped in the rivers. We remember when the Ohio River caught fire, when Dennis Kucinich was mayor of Cleveland, the Ohio River caught fire. The Great Lakes used to be toxic dumps where nothing was alive. Los Angeles used to be filled with black smudges in every single car on the road. Those of us who are about my age or older remember when cars were idling, you just see little puffs of blue smoke coming out of them. And when jets would take off, there were brown smudges in the air. Los Angeles, when I got to Los Angeles in 1988, I'm not exaggerating, I worked at a rental car agency and I was in Beverly Hills for about 2 weeks and suddenly the air cleared and I was like, oh my God, we're in a valley. There are mountains out there in Santa Monica. The visibility was 6 or 7 blocks. That was 1988. They got aggressive about emissions. We don't have smog in LA anymore. No, it's hard to believe, but it's just not true. We don't have those kind of days where you can't see anything anymore. Reasonable people want their environment protected. This is a reasonable, normal, rational position. And conservatives back this position because it's conservatives who go outside. Liberals don't go outside. It's unregulated out there. There are animals and things can happen to you. They don't want to go outside. They just want to feel good about making other people go outside with a permit. You know, permit to go outside, you have your safety helmet? Yes. Then your safety goggles? Yes. What about your specialty gloves? Are they good? Yes. You paid all your fees? Yes. Then knock yourself out. I'm not going out there. There's any number of things that could be happening out there. So, it's not an unreasonable position to take, and they want to put you in a position of being like, you don't like the environment, you want the children to die, no, you've got to just start the argument by saying, I'm completely in favor of rational, reasonable things that protect the environment, clean it up, and make it beautiful. And like everything else that's happening in the world today, in our country anyway, the environmental movement is much like the feminist movement, it's much like the civil rights movement. It's asymptotic. It's asymptotic. It's really important to understand this. What does that mean? Well, it means that 25 or 30 or 40 years ago, when you had environmental agencies, you had genuine big problems to solve. And to the credit of all of us as a family of people, as a family of Americans, did a remarkable job of solving most of these serious environmental issues. The Great Lakes are filled with fish now, and LA's air is clear now. The big fights were won. The big fights were won in women's rights in the 70s and the 80s. The big fights were won in civil rights and so on and so forth. You cannot legally discriminate against people anymore. You can't even socially discriminate. It's just not acceptable anymore. So what happens is, as you get increasing activism, you're starting to get this asymptotic thing where people have to do more and more and more and more work and more control to get just this incremental little difference. It comes a point where more and more activism is making people's lives worse. So that's why I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative because I like to be king of the hill. And if you think about it, just think about a graph where the horizontal axis, the x-axis, is increasing activism, right? Increasing busybodiness. And the vertical axis, you could call happiness or contentedness, or let's just call the vertical axis human awesomeness. When there are slaves living in America, I'm a liberal. Most conservative values are really traditional liberal values. Private property is a traditional liberal value in the traditional sense of the word. It liberated people. It gave them individuality. So when we're talking about black people who are either slaves, or if we're talking about them being discriminated against, if we're talking about them not having rights, if we're talking about them being treated poorly legally or whatever reason, then yes, I'm a liberal. I'm on the left side of that hill. Likewise, when we're talking about environmentalism, if we're talking about pulling mercury out of rivers, if we're talking about not dumping sewage into the lake, yeah, I'm a liberal. I'm on the upside of that hill. And so on and so on and so on. Feminism, equal rights for women, equal pay for women, all of that stuff. And I think all of you feel exactly the same way. But what's interesting about this idea of conservative is, what's interesting about our society today is, if you look at any one of these issues, on every single one of them, we're past the peak of the hill. Now increasing activism is making things worse. It's making life worse. And so people like me say, hold on. You continuing to do what used to be good is no longer good. Now you're making life worse. So I'm going to stop here. In fact, things might have been better a little bit further back on that curve. Conservatives are on the top of the human awesomeness curve. They said this was getting better, getting better, getting better. Now it's getting worse, worse, worse. We're going to stay here at the top, where things are the most awesome. That's what we believe. There's nobody here. I know my people. There's nobody here. Nobody here is racist. Nobody here is wants the world to catch fire or be poisoned. We just want some reason. When efforts to restrict these things are good, we're in favor of them. But when they become $40,000 permits to clear a shrub on your own property, we are no longer talking about environmental protection anymore. We're talking about thievery and tyranny. And we got to be able to make that statement and say, this is it. No, we're not going any further. We have to go back a couple steps. That's great. So, to close tonight about magical thinking, I want to talk, in conclusion, about something called a cargo cult. That's a picture of a cargo cult. It occurred in World War II. Anybody heard the term before? You know what a cargo cult is? It's one of the most fascinating things in sociology ever. During World War II, the United States Navy had to make bases all throughout the Pacific Ocean, and the island hopping campaign towards Japan meant that the United States Navy personnel had to appear on islands that never had contact with Western man at all, in many cases. And what would happen is when the Navy would go into one of these islands, they would build an airstrip, and they'd put in a little temporary control tower, and airplanes would arrive, and when the airplanes landed, they unloaded all of this really great stuff. They brought great food, great clothing, they brought medicine, they brought technology, radios, telephones, all kinds of cool stuff. But unfortunately, the war ended. For some of these people, unfortunately, the war ended. And so the planes stopped coming. And so the people on these islands decided to summon these sky gods back by building what they came for. So these people on these islands would make airplanes because they believed that attracted airplanes. They would make buildings that looked like control towers because they believed if they put the control towers in, the planes would come. That's what a cargo cult is. They became religiously attracted to the cargo that the technology represented. That airplane is there. They don't think it's a real airplane. They're not trying to make a real airplane. They think that when the airplanes were here, that's what brought them. They're summoning the cargo gods to come back and give them stuff. That's a perfectly rational explanation, frankly, if you want my opinion. I don't think anything wrong with that. Let's look at the next slide, though, because we see more and more of this today on the progressive left. And I want to go to the next one, too. Not that one. That's okay. There's a picture of guys with a homemade... You can leave that up, because this is the point. There are pictures of guys who made a flying saucer. You go to Burning Man and so on. But what you really find when you deal with the really true believers about the environmental movement, this is my observation, you're certainly free to disagree with this, at your own peril. I think that what we really see here, among the real radical environmentalists, like this young lady, is we are seeing a form of cargo cultism. And I think what they're basically doing is they have, in many cases, they have a belief like in Ramtha, they have a belief in aliens, they have a belief in UFOs, they have a belief that there is something up there judging us. And if we can make the earth worthy of their return, then they'll come back, and they'll come down, and they'll give us all this cool gear, and the cancer cure, and all this other stuff. But we have to make the earth worthy. We have to make it appeal to them. We have to be the stewards of what we think they want. I think this whole thing is kind of a cargo cult. I really do. I think these people are functioning on a level where they're trying to prepare the world for the great things that need to come. It's not a rational belief at all. And the ultimate essence of the cargo cult is it's easier to make a bamboo airplane than it is to make a real airplane. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to wish for this kind of salvation that comes through a moral transference. It's much easier to think about the color indigo and grow your aura than it is to actually go out and design and build a thorium reactor that's going to provide clean electricity for everybody. And ultimately, that's what it is about these environmentalists that really just burns me so much. There is a vanishingly small class of environmental activists who, in fact, does go out and live in the woods in a log cabin and burn wood and deal with the insects and everything else. I don't agree with those people, but I admire them. But the problem is that the people that are ruining your lives, who are destroying power plants and refineries and limiting what you can do to grow and all this other stuff, those people still go home in Mercedes-Benzes and they turn on their television sets and they watch things and they use electricity and they have hot water and they talk about green energy and we're going to destroy this coal plant or this oil plant or this nuclear plant. And they're perfectly happy to do this in abeyance of this future that is coming any minute now, but they still want the electricity. And that's the part that frankly pisses me off. They still want their electricity, and they have a car that says, save the planet on it, but their car runs on petroleum too. I drive a Prius. Really? Yeah. You get 32 miles to the gallon and you're saving the planet. I get 26 in my Camaro and I'm causing the destruction of the earth. Is that how it works? No. It's this unearned moral superiority. You see these coexist bumper stickers all over the place in LA. What are they really saying? They're saying, I'm a person who believes in getting along with other people and I'm going to spread the message. I believe in getting along with other people too. How many coexist bumper stickers are there in Iran right now? 0. They hang homosexuals by construction cranes over there. Those people need to be defended against. If you want to coexist, you need to take that coexist sticker off your car and put on one that says either United States Marine Corps or National Rifle Association. Because those are the elements of our society that is allowing us to be this decent and civilized and coexisting. That's what we need to be protecting. You want a free Tibet? Free Tibet bumper sticker. You want a free Tibet? You need to call the United States Marine Corps. Wishing about it doesn't make it so. It just makes you feel good about yourself. So I think that's really it. And I think that's really how you have to basically end up fighting these people. You have to basically say, you're not progressive. I know you call yourselves progressive, but you're not. You're not progressive. You're regressive. If this building downtown Bellingham was once a factory that made washing machines, and then it became an appliance store that sells washing machines, and then it became a Starbucks where people can have coffee without the benefit of having used washing machines, and then it becomes a second-hand store where all they do is sell hand-me-down clothes, that's not progressing. That's regressing. And ultimately, the thing I'd like to leave you with today is what these people want, what these tie-dye tyrants want, what these weenies want, is they all want us to live in a recycled future. They don't want a new future. They don't want new power plants. They don't want new buildings. They don't want new structures. They don't want new businesses. They want us to use the old stuff again. They want us to recycle the dams. They want us to recycle the buildings. They want us to recycle the food, recycle the energy, recycle everything. You don't get anything new. You don't get anything creative. You don't get anything out of the box. You have to make do with what was handed down from you before. You'll use it because you're just a cog in the ant machine. And then you'll hand it down to the next cog and he'll use a little more, wear it out a little bit more. It's un-American. It's the only word I have for it. It's un-American. And people say, well, that's what a fascist thing to say. It's not a fascist thing to say. What is this country? What is it? What is it about America that's unique? America was put on the earth to be a home for the individual. You had to invent the idea of an individual before you could have America. It seems like madness. It's like talking Greek to people today, but it's absolutely true. Prior to 1776, prior to the Founding Fathers and the Enlightenment in England and then in America, There was no such thing as an individual common person. They didn't exist anywhere on earth and anywhere in history. You were subjects of the king, or the emperor, or the sultan, or whatever. You didn't own anything. They owned everything. They owned everything. When Thomas Jefferson came back with, in the Declaration of Independence, when he says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Adams and Franklin must have just turned to him and said, cool story, bro, but where did this come from? Because up until that point, they'd always said life, liberty, and property. You talk to progressive property, yes. Property is what makes you an individual. It's what's yours. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. It doesn't have to be a building. It doesn't have to be a skyscraper. It doesn't have to be a private jet. It can be a hoodie. It's yours. You own it. You own it. You, the regular common person, own something, and they can't take it away from you. That's the only progress that has ever happened in all of human history. It happened, somebody writ that date in lightning across the pages of history. 1776 is the why, 1783 is the how, 1787. It's the idea of individual people having a life that's equivalent to the life of a baron or a duke or an earl or a real person, a king, an emperor, somebody with a name. When a battle like Agincourt was fought, after the battle was over, they would take a list of the casualties. Who died? The Earl of Warwick died, the Baron of such and such died, and 60,000 archers died. There were no common people with names or individuality or history. You had to invent that to have America. That's why America's here, for individuals. So this is how you have to fight these people. They're not progressives. They are not progressives. They are regressives who are using state power to take your stuff without your permission and tell you how to live your lives, and they're charging you real money to do it. This is not a trivial thing. They're using environmentalism or the children or whatever to justify the most primal and petty ideas in human history, which is, I am going to make you bend a knee to my will. And if you don't understand that, you will never beat these people. That is not environmentalism, that is self-hatred, and that is absolute control. That is self-hatred. This person has a psychological disease. And what she's doing here is she is standing there with a sign showing all of you how much better than you she is. She understands that if only the people would go away, the planet would be healed and we'd be back to Eden. She understands with this fig leaf what we really want is to get rid of everybody so that we can go back to the garden. And yet, she drives a car and she's wearing plastic and she is not going to take her own advice first, is she? No. That is the tyranny that we face today. It's the tyranny of people who are posing as better than other people and convincing well-intentioned people that they're better than other people. That is the face of somebody who is trying to tell you how to live your life. And if we make that argument to the American people, we win every time. Of course we want to protect the environment. I don't want to be told how to live by people with the kind of psychological damage that that person has. And you shouldn't have to. So, go to city hall meetings and stand up and call them what they are. They're tie-dyed tyrants. They're weenies. It's a weenie tyranny. It's the tyranny of the safety number. And all you have to do is show up, and they'll stop. Believe me. I can't tell you what a great time I had here tonight. I just can't tell you. I had the best possible time in Washington. Thank you so much for having me. I'll be the last person out of the room. Good night. Take care. And a big hand for our two tremendous guests, who I've learned an awful lot about.